Abstract. Despite increased awareness of neurodiversity in contemporary workplaces, organizational responses remain fragmented, compliance driven, and disconnected from neurodivergent lived experiences. This article examines how human resource management can catalyze systemic transformation toward neuroinclusion through co design approaches grounded in critical pragmatism and socio-technical systems theory. Drawing on Erzbeljan et al.'s 2025 process model, we identify four core organizational challenges: legal ambiguity, stakeholder ignorance and indifference, disclosure dilemmas, and resistance to change that perpetuate neuronormativity. We propose evidence based HR led interventions centering neurodivergent voices in organizational redesign, including participatory awareness building, inclusive policy co creation, relational support mechanisms, and embedded feedback systems. These interventions yield anticipated outcomes of enhanced recognition, realized potential, improved engagement, and reduced barriers. This article contributes to HRM scholarship by repositioning human resources as facilitators of collaborative, justice oriented, and iterative organizational change, rather than administrators of procedural compliance. Implications for practice include the necessity of participatory research, cross contextual implementation studies, intersectional analyses, and robust evaluation of co designed HR systems that enable meaningful transformation toward neuro inclusive workplaces. Introduction. Between 15 and 20% of the global workforce exhibits neurodivergence. Cognitive, sensory, or neurological differences such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and related conditions. Drabble et al., 2023. Yet contemporary organizations remain fundamentally structured around neuronormativity. The assumption that neurotypical functioning represents the default, desirable, and efficient mode of working. Benson, 2023. Hewig, 2020. Russo et al., 2022. This neuronormative design renders neurodivergent individuals systematically invisible, misrecognized, or marginalized within workplace systems. Doyle and McDowell, 2023. Russell and Rothenberg, 2024. Despite growing societal recognition of neurodiversity across educational, medical, and policy domains, Palmer et al., 2019, most organizational interventions fail to challenge underlying neuronormative assumptions. Instead, they focus narrowly on awareness training or disclosure protocols, remaining top down, compliance oriented, and unable to dismantle the deep rooted organizational norms that privilege neurotypical modes of thinking, behaving, and communicating. Herbal et al., 2025. Hennekem et al., 2023. The stakes extend beyond individual accommodation to encompass fundamental questions of organizational justice, innovation capacity, and workforce sustainability. Neurodivergent individuals face structural disadvantages in recruitment, retention, career progression, and workplace well being. Ezerins et al., 2024. Simultaneously, organizations forfeit substantial talent and innovation potential by designing systems that exclude neurodivergent capabilities. Austin and Pisano, 2017. K.R. Zeminska et al., 2019. This article addresses a critical gap between symbolic gestures toward neuroinclusion and systemic transformation. While prior scholarship acknowledges the limitations of conventional inclusion strategies, Russell and Rothenberg, 2024, Doyle, 2020, few studies offer procedural, participatory frameworks for redesigning organizations around neurodivergent needs and capabilities. Drawing on Erzbeljan et al.'s 2025 groundbreaking process model, we examine how HR can move beyond compliance to catalyze collaborative, justice-oriented organizational change. We proceed in 5 sections. First, we explore the neurodiversity landscape in contemporary organizations. Second, we analyze organizational and individual consequences of neuronormative design. Third, we examine evidence-based HR-led co-design interventions. Fourth, we consider long-term capacity building for neuroinclusion. Finally, we synthesize actionable insights for practitioners and researchers. The neuroinclusion landscape in contemporary organizations. Defining neurodiversity and neuroinclusion in workplace contexts. Neurodiversity describes naturally occurring variation in human neurocognitive functioning. Singer, 1999. The term encompasses conditions including autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, and other neurological differences. Importantly, neurodiversity represents a social model rather than a medical deficit framework, recognizing neurological variation as human diversity rather than pathology requiring remediation. Baron Cohen, 2017. Neuroinclusion extends beyond neurodiversity awareness to describe organizational systems, cultures, and practices designed to recognize, value, and leverage neurodivergent capabilities. Osbulgen et al., 2025. Where diversity acknowledges difference, inclusion ensures that difference translates into genuine belonging, participation, and opportunity. Nishii, 2013. Neuroinclusion therefore requires transforming organizational structures that systematically privilege neurotypical functioning. Neuronormativity operates as what Hewig, 2020, terms a disciplinary logic, shaping organizational expectations around productivity, communication, and interaction in alignment with neurotypical patterns rather than as neutral standards. This neuronormative design manifests across recruitment processes favoring traditional interviews, open plan offices assuming universal sensory tolerance, communication norms privileging spontaneous verbal interaction, and performance management systems rewarding neurotypical executive functioning. Doyle and McDowell, 2022. Nash, 2024. State of practice, prevalence, drivers, and distribution. Research based on medical identification suggests 15 to 20% of the population exhibits neurodivergence. Drabble et al., 2023. However, this estimate likely understates true prevalence, given barriers to diagnosis including cost, access to specialists, gender and cultural biases in diagnostic criteria, and individuals who reject pathologizing labels. Baker et al., 2020, Doyle et al., 2022. Contemporary neurodiversity employment initiatives remain concentrated in specific sectors, particularly technology organizations with resources and infrastructure to support reasonable adjustments. Austin and Pisano, 2017. Wakawiak, 2023. These programs, while promising, represent isolated pockets rather than systemic change. Critical scholarship warns that such initiatives often serve corporate reputation management rather than genuine structural transformation. Bernick, 2023. Silver et al., 2023. Several drivers shape organizational engagement with neuroinclusion. Legal frameworks including the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, United Nations, 2006, the UK Equality Act, and the U.S. Americans with Disabilities Act establish baseline protections. However, these frameworks often fail to capture neurodivergent realities, particularly for individuals without formal diagnosis or who reject medical categorization. Baker et al., 2020. Andreessen et al., 2024. Business case arguments emphasize neurodivergent individuals' distinctive capabilities in pattern recognition, systematic thinking, attention to detail, and creative problem solving. Austin and Pisano, 2017. Yet over-reliance on business case logic risks instrumentalizing neurodivergent employees and reinforcing deficit narratives when individuals don't conform to savant stereotypes. Doyle and McDowell, 2023. Increasingly, justice-oriented and employee voice perspectives drive neuroinclusion efforts, recognizing neurodivergent individuals' fundamental rights to workplace participation, dignity, and self-determination. Bell et al., 2011. Morillas, 2023. This orientation aligns with broader movements toward employee-centric, purpose-driven organizations. Cook, 2024. Organizational and individual consequences of neuronormativity. Organizational performance impacts. Neuronormative organizational design generates substantial costs across recruitment, retention, innovation, and reputational dimensions. In recruitment, organizations forfeit exceptional talent through neurotypical biased processes. Traditional interviews disadvantage neurodivergent candidates who may struggle with unstructured social interaction, direct eye contact, or spontaneous verbal articulation, yet possess outstanding technical and analytical capabilities. Patton, 2019. Erickson et al., 2014. Retention challenges compound recruitment difficulties. Neurodivergent employees experience higher turnover driven by workplace environments misaligned with their sensory, communication, and executive functioning needs. Kahn et al., 2023. The costs of turnover, including recruitment expenses, training investments, and lost institutional knowledge, substantially impact organizational performance. Innovation capacity suffers when organizations exclude neurodivergent perspectives. Diverse cognitive approaches enhance problem solving, creativity, and adaptability. K.R. Zeminska et al., 2019. Neurodivergent individuals often bring distinctive capabilities in pattern recognition, systems thinking, and unconventional approaches that drive innovation. Neuronormative environments that pressure conformity to neurotypical norms therefore reduce the cognitive diversity essential for innovation. Austin and Pisano, 2017. Reputational and employer branding consequences increasingly matter as neurodiversity awareness grows. Organizations perceived as excluding neurodivergent individuals face talent acquisition challenges, consumer backlash, and reduced employee engagement among neurotypical allies. Ali et al., 2024. Hennekam and Falmer, 2024. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts. Neuronormative workplaces exact severe costs on neurodivergent individuals' well-being, identity, and career outcomes. Doyle et al., 2022, document how neurodivergent employees, particularly those at intersections of multiple marginalized identities, experience compounded stigma affecting disclosure decisions, workplace belonging, and psychological safety. The passing phenomenon, whereby neurodivergent individuals conceal their neurodivergence to conform to neurotypical norms, generates substantial emotional labor and identity conflict. Osbaldjian et al., 2023. Santuzzi and Keating, 2022. Drawing on Goffman's 1963/2009 stigma framework, researchers show how strategic identity management allows neurodivergent individuals to navigate neuronormative environments, but at considerable psychological cost. Disclosure dilemmas intensify these challenges. Many neurodivergent employees avoid disclosure due to stigma fears, anticipated career disadvantage, or lack of formal diagnosis. Doyle et al., 2022. Yet non-disclosure precludes accessing necessary accommodations, creating a double bind: disclose and risk discrimination, or conceal and forfeit support. Performance management systems, designed around neurotypical executive functioning, often misrecognize neurodivergent capabilities. Traditional feedback mechanisms emphasizing errors and deficits rather than strengths and learning opportunities particularly disadvantage neurodivergent employees. Kluger and Nur, 2010. Sates and Chu, 2022. For neurodivergent individuals at intersections of race, gender, sexuality, and other marginalized identities, workplace challenges compound. Barnett, 2024, and Doyle et al., 2022, demonstrate how intersecting stigmas produce deeper concealment, reduced disclosure, and intensified workplace marginalization. Evidence-based organizational responses, HR-led co-design interventions. The co-design approach, centering neurodivergent voices. Co-design represents a collaborative methodology engaging diverse stakeholders, particularly neurodivergent individuals, in shaping inclusive HR interventions. Osbaldjian, 2024, Zaimnopoulos and Alexiou, 2018. Rather than designing for neurodivergent employees, co-design positions them as co-architects of organizational systems, policies, and practices. The co-design approach draws legitimacy from demonstrated effectiveness in healthcare, education, and service design, where it improves system responsiveness, equity, and user satisfaction. Palmer et al., 2019. Bate and Robert, 2023. In workplace contexts, co-design addresses persistent critiques that traditional employee resource groups, while important for peer support, rarely generate substantive organizational redesign or reduce stigma. Colella and Breyer, 2011. Silver et al., 2023. Effective co-design practices for neuroinclusion. Ensuring authentic neurodivergent representation in design teams, not tokenistic participation. Compensating neurodivergent co-designers for their expertise and labor. Providing accessible participation formats accommodating diverse communication preferences, sensory needs, and executive functioning styles. Establishing ongoing involvement mechanisms beyond initial design phases toward co-ownership and continuous improvement. Creating psychologically safe spaces where neurodivergent individuals can articulate needs without stigma or career risk. Microsoft's Neurodiversity Hiring Program exemplifies effective co-design. Rather than adapting traditional recruitment to accommodate neurodivergent candidates, Microsoft redesigned its entire hiring process through partnership with neurodivergent individuals and autism advocacy organizations. The program replaces traditional interviews with extended assessment academies, where candidates demonstrate capabilities through hands on projects, receive clear expectations and schedules, and interact with hiring managers in structured formats. Neurodivergent employees subsequently help design workplace accommodations, mentorship structures, and career development pathways. Austin and Pisano, 2017. Shared inquiry and awareness building. Addressing ignorance and indifference requires moving beyond surface level training to genuine shared inquiry, examining how neuronormative assumptions shape organizational systems. Osbulgen et al., 2025. This intervention combines information gathering from neurodivergent stakeholders with collaborative learning, engaging neurotypical employees, managers, and leadership. Drawing on the sociology of strategic ignorance, Magoe, 2012, effective awareness building distinguishes between unknowing and active disregard. Many organizations maintain plausible deniability about neurodivergent employees' needs and contributions through what Herbal et al. 2025 term ignorance as design, structures and practices that systematically avoid acknowledging neurodiversity. Shared inquiry practices, neurodivergent led educational initiatives, where neurodivergent employees and external advocates share lived experiences and practical knowledge. Collaborative problem solving workshops, bringing together neurodivergent and neurotypical employees to identify barriers and co create solutions. Structural audits examining how recruitment, onboarding, performance management, and advancement systems privilege neurotypical functioning. Leadership engagement requirements ensuring executives participate in learning and demonstrate accountability for neuroinclusion goals. Ongoing dialogue mechanisms rather than one off training events, embedding continuous learning into organizational culture. Ernst and Young's Neurodiversity Centers of Excellence demonstrate sustained awareness building. Beyond initial training, EY established ongoing learning communities where neurotypical and neurodivergent employees collaboratively examine workplace challenges and innovations. These communities informed redesign of project allocation systems, client communication protocols, and workspace configurations, translating awareness into structural change. McDowell et al., 2023. However, organizations must guard against overemphasizing awareness while neglecting structural and cultural transformation. As Dobbin and Caleb, 2016, demonstrate, diversity training alone rarely produces lasting change without accompanying policy reform, leadership accountability, and resource allocation. Inclusive policy development and legal interpretation. Legal ambiguity surrounding neurodivergence presents both challenges and opportunities for HR-led policy innovation. Baker et al., 2020, Moeller, 2025. Rather than defaulting to minimal compliance, progressive organizations partner with neurodivergent stakeholders to develop policies that honor both legal requirements and lived realities. The disconnect between evolving case law and HR capacity to interpret and apply it meaningfully, Andreessen et al., 2024, necessitates collaborative policy development. Neurodivergent individuals possess crucial knowledge about which accommodations genuinely support their participation versus those that perform compliance without enabling inclusion. Inclusive policy co-creation approaches, flexible accommodation frameworks moving beyond prescribed lists toward individualized needs assessment and iterative adjustment. Proactive accommodation cultures offering supports universally rather than requiring disclosure and formal requests. Self-identification protocols respecting individuals who identify as neurodivergent without formal diagnosis while maintaining necessary documentation for legal protection. Confidentiality and disclosure safeguards ensuring voluntary disclosure with protections against information misuse or stigmatization. Reasonable adjustment processes designed for accessibility, clear, jargon-free language, multiple communication channels, and supportive rather than gatekeeping orientation. SAP's Autism at Work program illustrates collaborative policy development. SAP worked with neurodivergent employees and autism advocacy organizations to create accommodation policies, reflecting actual needs rather than assumptions. These include flexible work arrangements beyond traditional, reasonable accommodation frameworks, modified interview processes as standard practice rather than special cases, sensory-friendly workspace options, and structured onboarding with assigned mentors. Crucially, SAP positioned these accommodations as enhancing all employees' experiences rather than special treatments for neurodivergent individuals. K.R. Zeminska et al., 2019. Relational support pathways, navigating disclosure and identity. Disclosure dilemmas, whether to reveal neurodivergence, to whom, when, and how, create persistent challenges for neurodivergent employees. Santuzzi and Keating, 2022. HR-led interventions must create conditions where disclosure becomes genuinely voluntary, safe, and productive, rather than risky and burdensome. Building on research demonstrating how neurodivergent individuals engage in strategic identity management to navigate neuronormative environments. Osbaldjian et al., 2023. Effective support pathways recognize disclosure as relational and contextual rather than individual and static. Relational support mechanisms. Multiple disclosure pathways, including confidential HR channels, manager conversations, and peer support groups, with clear information about implications of each. Psychological safety building through visible leadership commitment, anti discrimination enforcement, and positive neurodiversity narratives. Peer mentorship programs connecting neurodivergent employees for support, advice, and community. Allyship training preparing neurotypical colleagues to support neurodivergent coworkers without voyeurism or saviorism. Career advocacy ensuring disclosure doesn't limit advancement opportunities and neurodivergent employees access sponsorship and development. J.P. Morgan Chase's Autism at Work initiative demonstrates relational support infrastructure. The program provides assigned neurotypical mentors who receive extensive training in neurodiversity affirmative practices, confidential channels for requesting accommodations without formal disclosure, career coaches specializing in neurodivergent employee development, and employee resource groups offering peer community and advocacy. Ezerins et al., 2024. Importantly, effective support systems recognize intersectionality. Neurodivergent individuals from racialized, LGBTQ+, or other marginalized communities face compounded disclosure challenges requiring intersectionally informed support. Doyle et al., 2022. Barnett, 2024. Embedded feedback and continuous improvement systems. Resistance to neuroinclusion efforts, ranging from subtle indifference to overt backlash, demands embedded feedback mechanisms ensuring interventions remain responsive and adaptive. Osbaldjian et al., 2025. Rather than implementing static programs, effective organizations create continuous improvement systems. Drawing on socio-technical systems theory, Pasmore, 1988, Emery and Trist, 1973, sustained neuroinclusion requires jointly optimizing technical systems, policies, technologies, processes, and social systems, culture, relationships, norms. Embedded feedback enables this ongoing optimization. Continuous improvement mechanisms. Regular neurodivergent employee surveys assessing workplace inclusion climate, accommodation effectiveness, and remaining barriers. Participatory evaluation, engaging neurodivergent employees in assessing intervention outcomes and recommending refinements. Anonymous reporting channels for discrimination, inadequate accommodations, or other neuroinclusion failures. Metrics and accountability structures tracking neuroinclusion goals across recruitment, retention, advancement, and engagement with leadership consequences for non-achievement. Iteration and adaptation protocols, building in regular review and revision of neuroinclusion strategies based on feedback and outcomes. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HP, demonstrates embedded feedback systems through its Dandelion program supporting neurodivergent employees. HPE established quarterly review processes where neurodivergent participants evaluate program effectiveness, recommend modifications, and co-design new initiatives. This feedback informed workspace design changes, communication protocol adjustments, and career development innovations. HPE also implemented recruitment and retention metrics, specifically tracking neurodivergent employees with executive accountability. Kahn et al., 2023. Critical to managing resistance, organizations must anticipate and address backlash. As Foss and Klein, 2023, document, neuroinclusion efforts may face criticism as woke or burdensome, particularly when not clearly connected to organizational strategy. Effective responses include demonstrating business value, emphasizing universal benefits, ensuring adequate resourcing, and maintaining leadership commitment despite resistance. Distributed leadership and neurodivergent leadership development. Transforming neuronormativity requires not only including neurodivergent individuals as employees, but supporting their emergence as organizational leaders. Ayaz et al., 2024. Erzbiljan et al., 2023. Traditional leadership models privilege neurotypical communication, social interaction, and executive functioning styles, effectively excluding neurodivergent leadership potential. Co-design approaches create opportunities for neurodivergent individuals to demonstrate and develop leadership capabilities through authentic participation, rather than conformity to neurotypical leadership ideals. Leadership development interventions. Broadening leadership definitions beyond neurotypical communication and social norms to recognize diverse leadership strengths. Neurodivergent-led initiatives positioning neurodivergent employees as project leaders, change champions, and innovation drivers. Sponsorship and advocacy, ensuring neurotypical leaders actively support neurodivergent employees' advancement. Leadership pipeline visibility, tracking neurodivergent representation in management and executive roles with accountability for advancement equity. Alternative leadership pathways creating technical, specialist, and project leadership tracks alongside traditional management hierarchies. Building long-term organizational capacity for neuroinclusion. Psychological contract recalibration, from conformity to co-creation. Traditional employment psychological contracts implicitly require neurodivergent employees to pass as neurotypical, masking their neurodivergence to approximate neurotypical functioning. Osbaldjin et al., 2023. Sustainable neuroinclusion requires renegotiating psychological contracts toward mutual recognition and co-creation. Rousseau's 2015 Idiosyncratic Deals, Ideals, framework offers one approach, enabling individualized work arrangements negotiated between employees and employers. For neurodivergent employees, ideals might encompass customized work schedules, communication protocols, sensory environments, and performance expectations. However, purely individualized approaches risk privatizing neuroinclusion as personal accommodation rather than organizational transformation. More fundamentally, organizations must shift from expecting neurodivergent employees to adapt toward designing systems accommodating neurodiversity as baseline. Psychological contract transformation practices, communicating neuroinclusion as organizational value embedded in mission, strategy, and leadership messages rather than compliance obligation. Normalizing accommodation and flexibility for all employees, reducing stigma associated with needs disclosure. Recognizing neurodivergent contributions, explicitly valuing distinctive capabilities neurodivergent employees bring. Authentic belonging initiatives creating organizational cultures where neurodivergent employees can bring their full selves to work without masking. Long-term commitment signals including sustained resource allocation, career pathway development, and leadership representation. Operational model redesign, technology, workspace, and process innovation. Physical and technological infrastructure profoundly shapes neuroinclusion possibilities. Traditional open-plan offices, for instance, create sensory overload for many neurodivergent individuals while fluorescent lighting, ambient noise, and interruption-driven workflows generate additional challenges. Weber et al., 2024. Nash, 2024. Simultaneously, digital transformation creates opportunities for neuro-inclusive operational models through assistive technologies, flexible work arrangements, and accessible communication platforms. Wakawiak, 2021-2023. However, technology implementation requires neurodivergent input, ensuring tools genuinely support rather than creating new barriers. Infrastructure and technology interventions. Sensory diverse workspace design including quiet zones, adjustable lighting, noise reduction, and individual control over environmental conditions. Flexible work location policies enabling remote, hybrid, and on-site options responsive to individual needs. Accessible communication technologies supporting diverse modalities, written, verbal, visual, rather than privileging synchronous verbal interaction. Assistive technology provision including screen readers, organization software, noise-canceling equipment, and other supportive tools. Process redesign, reducing unnecessary meetings, creating structured agendas and advanced materials, and allowing asynchronous participation. Importantly, Weber et al. 2024 demonstrate that workspace adjustments benefiting neurodivergent employees, managing light and noise, providing decompression spaces, reducing interruptions, enhance all employees' experiences, making workplaces more human-centered generally. Audicon, a German consultancy, exclusively employing autistic IT consultants, exemplifies operational model innovation. Audicon provides sensory-friendly office spaces with quiet rooms and adjustable environments, job coaches supporting autistic employees, flexible work arrangements, and client communication mediated through neurotypical support staff when preferred. This infrastructure enables autistic consultants to leverage their technical strengths without neuronormative workplace demands. K.R. Zeminska et al., 2019. Data governance and algorithm stewardship, preventing neurodivergent exclusion in AI-driven HRM. Artificial intelligence increasingly shapes HRM through algorithmic recruitment screening, performance monitoring, and workforce analytics. Malik et al., 2023. However, AI systems frequently perpetuate neuronormative biases, systematically disadvantaging neurodivergent candidates and employees. Birkin and Osbaldin, 2025. Vassilopoulou et al., 2024. Algorithmic recruitment screening may downgrade applications with employment gaps common among neurodivergent individuals or nonlinear career trajectories. Performance monitoring systems may flag neurodivergent employees' different work patterns as problematic. Workforce analytics may reinforce neurotypical success profiles. Preventing algorithmic neuronormativity requires involving neurodivergent stakeholders in AI development, deployment, and governance. Osbaldin et al., 2025. AI governance for neuroinclusion. Neurodivergent participation in algorithm design, ensuring neurodivergent perspectives, inform AI development. Bias auditing specific to neurodiversity, examining algorithmic outputs for neuronormative assumptions and discriminatory patterns. Transparency and explainability, enabling neurodivergent employees to understand and contest algorithmic decisions affecting them. Human oversight and appeals processes, preventing fully automated decisions that may embed neuronormativity without recourse. Continuous monitoring and adjustment, regularly evaluating AI systems, impacts on neurodivergent employees and iterating based on findings. Continuous learning systems, embedding neuroinclusion in organizational DNA. Sustaining neuroinclusion beyond initial interventions requires embedding continuous learning into organizational culture, systems, and practices. Rousseau and Ten Have, 2022. Drawing on Johnson and Osbaldin's 2013 Diversity Maturity Framework, organizations progress from awareness to transformation through sustained learning, resource allocation, and structural integration. Continuous learning infrastructure. Communities of practice bringing together neurodivergent and neurotypical employees for ongoing dialogue, knowledge sharing, and collaborative problem solving. Research partnerships collaborating with academic institutions to rigorously evaluate neuroinclusion interventions and contribute to evidence base. External benchmarking and networks participating in industry and cross-sector neuroinclusion networks to learn from leading practices. Internal knowledge management, systematically capturing, sharing, and building on neuroinclusion learnings across the organization. Integration into core HR systems, embedding neuroinclusion considerations into standard recruitment, development, performance management, and succession planning, rather than treating as separate initiative. Specialistern, founded in Denmark and now operating globally, demonstrates how neuroinclusion can become organizational DNA. Specialistern's entire business model centers on sourcing, training, and employing autistic individuals as consultants. The organization continuously refines its approaches through participatory evaluation, maintains extensive knowledge management systems, documenting effective practices, collaborates with researchers studying neurodiversity employment, and shares its model through a global franchise network supporting other organizations' neuroinclusion efforts. Austin and Pisano, 2017. Conclusion. Transforming neuronormative organizations toward genuine neuroinclusion demands moving beyond compliance and accommodation toward participatory redesign, centering neurodivergent voices. This article has examined how HR can catalyze this transformation through co design approaches, grounded in critical pragmatism and socio technical systems theory. He identified four fundamental organizational challenges perpetuating neuronormativity: legal ambiguity that disconnects regulatory frameworks from neurodivergent realities, stakeholder ignorance and strategic indifference, maintaining plausible deniability about neurodivergent exclusion, disclosure dilemmas creating impossible choices between authenticity and safety, and entrenched resistance privileging neuronormative status quo. These challenges require systemic, rather than piecemeal responses. HR led co design interventions offer pathways towards systemic transformation. By centering neurodivergent individuals as co architects, rather than passive recipients of inclusion efforts, organizations can develop shared understanding through collaborative inquiry, create genuinely inclusive policies informed by lived experience, build relational support infrastructures, enabling safe disclosure and authentic participation, and establish embedded feedback systems, ensuring continuous improvement. These interventions generate meaningful outcomes: enhanced recognition of neurodivergent identities and capabilities, realization of neurodivergent potential through inclusive design, improved engagement and retention, and reduced barriers to participation and advancement. Long term capacity building requires fundamental shifts in psychological contracts, from conformity expectations to co creation partnerships. Operational model redesign ensuring physical and technological infrastructures support neurodiversity, algorithm stewardship preventing AI driven HRM from perpetuating neuronormativity, and continuous learning systems embedding neuroinclusion into organizational DNA rather than treating it as temporary initiative. Key takeaways for practitioners: position HR as change catalyst, not compliance administrator. Move beyond procedural accommodation toward participatory transformation. Center neurodivergent voices throughout. Ensure authentic participation in diagnosis, design, and delivery, not tokenistic consultation. Address both technical and social systems. Joint optimization of policies, technologies, and processes with culture, relationships, and norms. Build accountability structures. Establish metrics, leadership consequences, and resource allocation, ensuring sustained commitment. Embrace iteration and learning. Expect imperfection, gather feedback, adapt approaches, and treat neuroinclusion as ongoing practice, not finished project. Recognize intersectionality. Account for how neurodivergence intersects with race, gender, sexuality, and other identities shaping inclusion experiences. Demonstrate universal benefits. Position neuroinclusive design as enhancing all employees' experiences rather than special treatment. The organizational case for neuroinclusion extends beyond justice imperatives, though these alone suffice, to encompass innovation, talent, and sustainability advantages. Organizations excluding neurodivergent perspectives forfeit cognitive diversity, essential for complex problem solving. Those creating genuinely inclusive environments access exceptional talent and build employer brands attracting diverse, values aligned workers. Most fundamentally, neuro-inclusive organizations demonstrate human-centered practices, respecting all employees' dignity and enabling authentic participation. The path from neuronormative organizations to neuro-inclusive ones requires courage, resources, and persistence. HR professionals possess unique positioning to lead this transformation, bridging organizational systems with employee experiences, translating between strategic and operational levels, and facilitating participatory change processes. By adopting co design approaches grounded in critical pragmatism and socio technical systems thinking, HR can move from perpetuating neuronormativity through ignorant design toward co creating organizational futures where neurodiversity is genuinely valued, included, and leveraged.